talking about all things coaching. Again, if you want to get in touch with us about any of the content that we're talking about today or in the shows that we talk about throughout the period that we're going to be broadcasting, then just get in touch with us via our social media platforms. And don't forget to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. Just also click the bell for new content as we go on. Well, better than last week for me. When I last presented, I was live from the hallway on last week's episode that I presented. But today I'm in a much comfier position. I'm in a chair. I'm in the living room. So I'm a very, very happy man. At least my back is not going to give me any jip. But anyway, moving forward, today's program we're going to talk about is mainly regarding team preparation. Of course, preparing your team for whatever game your club, your team are going to be facing. What are the challenges that face you as a coach or as a manager or as an assistant manager going forward into a game? What is required and what steps do you need to take to prepare your team to be as best as it can be come the match day in question? But I'm delighted to say that on today's instalment, I have been joined by a man whose wealth of knowledge is well welcomed throughout our programme and with our team. I'm delighted to say that I've been joined by Woking's assistant manager, Mr. Ian Dyer. Hello, Ian, and welcome to the show.
Evening, James. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I have to say, my back is in better condition than what it was last week. So I'm an extremely happy man, to say the least.
Yeah, you look very comfortable there, to be fair.
The chair's brilliant, honestly. I can say it's sort of like a villain's chair, to be honest. I mean, last time I had like a cupboard door behind me, so it's a much better upgrade compared to what I had last week. So I can't complain with that. So it's all good, which is decent. I just want to also mention welcome to you to the Back of the Net team as well. You are a brand new spangled member of the Back of the Net team, and I think everybody who's involved with Back of the Net are absolutely delighted to have you on board. We can't wait to get more from you as the weeks and shows go on. So welcome in that respect.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've always been a good kind of follower of the show, and obviously being involved in non-league football myself, it's it's great to come on and talk to people that have got the knowledge and experience as well within the game. So very much looking forward to getting involved.
Brilliant stuff. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, which is of course team preparation, how are you personally coping with the lockdown situation at the moment? It must be difficult in a coaching aspect as well, give or take the unprecedented circumstances that we're currently in at the moment, especially with the news today of the National League, which we'll touch upon in another programme and another show to come. How are you dealing with the day-to-day situation at present?
Yeah, it's difficult, obviously, similar to everyone else. I think it's obviously very strange times and unprecedented really for what's going on. So, along with everyone else, it's been obviously a change of routine, a change of habits. And, I think especially for those involved in football that, you spend your life gearing up towards a match day on a Saturday. So I think that in that respect, the lack of routine around training and preparing for games has certainly been one that's been a complete change for myself. So, obviously we've got to understand in these times that there's a lot more important things in football, and we all, I think, appreciate that, but at the same time, we're allowed to say that we miss it, and obviously looking forward to it coming back. And obviously that won't be for this season in terms of playing any more games, but hopefully once this is all over and we can get back into football again, then I think everyone's very much looking forward to that.
Likewise, I think the day that football can resume again will be an extremely joyous day for everybody involved. Just, of course, we have to get to the other side first and make sure that everything's safe and proper before we can start. But going into the topic of today's programme is, of course, match and team preparation. Of course, looking from a coaching perspective, it is a vital, important part of any structure that match preparation and team preparation is utilised to its fullest. But before we get into that even more, I just want to ask you, Ian, for those people who are not quite sure about your background and what the role is of an assistant manager, can you run us through what your job title really is and what kind of things do you do on a day-to-day structure being the assistant manager?
Yeah, I think a little bit about my background first. I've been coaching a long time. I started coaching very young. I kind of played semi-professional football, was never going to kind of cut it as a pro. So very early decided to kind of get into coaching and start doing my badges. I think I did my first badge when I was 17 and pretty much have been working ever since. So I've got quite a broad range of experience in terms of working at professional academy level, working overseas, obviously, you know, working for the last 5 years in non-league football as well. So my experience is quite diverse, I guess, of kind of not the norm of coaches coming through, which has given me great experience. And I find myself now obviously working at Woking Football Club as assistant to Alan Dowson, who I've been lucky enough to have worked with for the past 5 years at Woking, and then Hampton and Richmond before that. I guess it's a bit of a kind of jack of all trades in terms of non-league football with an assistant manager's role, because we obviously at our club don't have the resources and the personnel to take up a lot of the different jobs that need doing on a weekly basis. And when you talk about preparation, things like match analysis, things like fitness and nutrition work, certainly preparing the players on the coaching pitch and putting presentations together, obviously going out and working in the community as well. So it's a little bit of everything. And, obviously assistant manager roles will differ from club to club, from league to league. But certainly for myself, it's about being very, very hands-on on a day-to-day basis and working. I think the main probably word to use in the role is to support the manager in their philosophy, in their values, their vision for the team and for the club, and obviously to support all aspects of that and bring my own expertise to the table. So, I mean, specifically, one of my main responsibilities is the coaching of the team. I'm very hands-on in terms of that capacity as well, and also a lot of the opposition kind of scouting work and presentations to present to our players. But like I said, as assistant managers up and down the leagues, and obviously, right down to kind of grassroots and youth football as well, will differ in terms of the roles they have. And, I found myself pretty fortunate to be doing it, because it opens me up to lots of experiences and gaining knowledge in lots of different areas as well as just the coaching side of it. So, it's quite a diverse set of kind of roles, I guess, that I have, and very much enjoy my work on a daily basis.
No, it's fantastic to get to hear what you've got to say, Ian, and even in that short segment, it's a really interesting insight into see how your job is structured. And you're right to say that with the football pyramid and the football league, the role of the assistant manager is most certainly very different, even more so if you go further up the leagues, and especially more so with preparing a team and making sure that you've got the best squad and the best players that are available to you. From a point of view which you have at Woking and from the experience you've had at Hampton and Richmond, what is your typical structure that you utilise? Giving an example to other coaches who are watching this programme, what is your basic structure that you have in preparing your players for any set game before match day?
Yeah, I think, one of my kind of things that I like to be within my working week is very, very organised and have kind of a deliberate structure that I work to every week. And I heard a brilliant quote years ago that was after the game is before the game. And it basically means that obviously at 5 o'clock on a Saturday, once you're done with obviously your game on that day, you're already starting to prepare for the following game. And that really struck me, I guess. And probably since then, I've started to work more in those terms as turning our attention pretty quickly to the next, obviously, challenge, the next game ahead. In terms of a typical working week, as early as Sunday, I probably watch back our game from the Saturday. And again, sometimes just watch it, just to watch it and see if I can pick up things differently than I did on the day itself of the game. Sometimes a little bit more deliberate around specific areas of the team that we may need to improve that week. And that's done as early as Sunday, really. And then from Monday, myself and Douse will sit down and we talk about, obviously, the working week. And we're a part-time team, which is quite rare in our division. Which means we only train 2 days a week, 2 evenings a week. So we've really got to get all of our work with the players in those 2 sessions on those 2 days. So it takes a lot of planning. We do a lot of work on the Monday looking at the opposition. We watch probably their last 2 or 3 games in a lot of detail and try and obviously pick up things that we can, exploit in terms of going out to try and win the game. Obviously, depending on the opposition, we may not know as much about them as before. So, for example, this year we're new to the league. So a lot of it's been kind of learning about players, about the systems they play, the managers, the tendencies and things like that, just to give our players the best possible opportunity to be prepared to play at the weekend. And from there, we're kind of have an idea in our mind based on our game on the Saturday and the opposition we're playing of a team that we might pick. That's not definitive. That's never definitive on a Monday, but we will kind of work towards that kind of structure throughout the course of the week and plan our coaching sessions accordingly with that in mind. And I think for me, it's really important as a coach to know as much as you can about the opposition, so go into as much detail as you can about the individuals, how they create goals, how they score goals, in as much detail as you can. And then I guess the challenge for us is to really drip feed the information to our players, both individually and in terms of their units in the team during the week, because at no stage do we want to sit down and do an hour, 2 hour long presentation talking about the opposition. That information is for us, but obviously the key bits of it we need to dissect and then get across to our players. So a lot of the week will obviously revolve around that planning for the game. You've got to take different things into account, like travel. Obviously, there's some long journeys in the National League, so things like travel and preparation around that as well come into play. So it's a pretty full-on week. The fact that our players are part-time, but myself and the manager are full-time, does allow us that time to get the extra detail. We feel that's really important to be able to compete as a part-time team in that division.
Well, I have to say it's extremely fascinating to get to know the day-to-day running of being an assistant manager and how the preparation of getting a team ready from an outsider's point of view seems to layer back so much compared with somebody who just turns up on the game day as a fan and they don't see the behind the scenes work that goes back well back, even days and weeks before a game is even prepared. My next question to ask you is, how important is it physically to prepare your players as well as mentally, really? What's the mental aspect of getting your players ready before a game? Is there a particular mindset that you would instill into your players and the staff that work around you or below you to ensure that the strategy and the tactics that you wish to bring forward are achieved within a game day? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think when you talk about preparing a team to go and play and win a game at our level on a Saturday, you have to prepare them in every aspect of the game. So technically, they need to be ready to obviously go and perform their individual roles. Tactically, they need the information. If it's a change of shape to the team or maybe a different style we're going to play in terms of maybe pressing from the front or dropping off a little bit, they need to be kind of clued in with that and have understood that. And obviously, one of the most important things for me is psychologically to make sure that they're ready. They're motivated, they're confident, and they're ready to go and compete. And all those aspects, obviously, we need to work on across the week. Sometimes you don't need to talk to every individual. Obviously, we have to manage individuals within our group. Some need maybe a little bit of a kick up the backside. Some may need a bit of an arm around their shoulder. It's a cliche to kind of get them motivated and maybe give them that little bit of extra confidence. Things like form will come into play as well. So it's obviously a broad range of different ways you need to prepare your players. And of course, coaches at grassroots level and youth level maybe don't even have 2 training sessions a week. It might be limited to 1. So I think it's really important to always get across your key messages, because as much as coaches we want to kind of divulge all of the information we know, I think it's really important that you gain all that information for yourself, but it's the way you then deliver it to the players so it's manageable for them to take on board, and you don't overload them with information for any one game. At Woking, for example, we have kind of underlining principles around the way we work. So, we're a very high tempo team. We want to work hard to win the ball, and we want to work hard to keep the ball. Obviously, within that framework, we could change systems, as we have a few times this season, to counteract maybe an opposition we're playing against that may be a little bit stronger in terms of individuals. So I think as long as you've got that kind of framework and your players know what's expected to play for you as a coach or the manager within that team, which is, of course, an ongoing thing to build that culture and philosophy. I think week to week, it's just about, adding the little 1% here and there that you think are going to add value to individuals and the group to get them as prepared as you can for a weekend. But there is a lot that goes into it. I mean, you say obviously the fans won't understand probably how much goes into it. I don't think the players will. And that's the idea. Again, you don't want to overload the players with that. You want the players to come in, enjoy training, take on board the information. And the most important thing is that the players feel prepared to play on a Saturday, regardless of how the coach and the manager feels. And if the players are ready to go and are confident come 3 o'clock, then I think it's pretty typically, been quite a good working week in that respect.
So, yeah, very, very interesting points that you mentioned there, Ian, regarding what we've been talking about. I couldn't agree more with you that players need to be in the right mindset before a game takes place, making sure that their headspace is in the right frame of mind. Another topic, a subject I'm going to sort of pick up upon is how you cope. And this is a coach's worst nightmare, is when a plan unravels due to external circumstances. And for a particular point of view is if you lose a key player. So an example which I'll use before, 2 examples of how a plan can go wrong is, one is the France 98 final with Brazil. Ronaldo, of course, key player in the tournament, goes off sick before the game with an epileptic fit. He's then ruled out of the game. Then hours before the game begins, he's included in the squad. The mentality is shaken. And of course, we all know Brazil lose the final to France 3-0. And a more local to home example for you, which must have been difficult in the scenario that you and Dows had to face, was losing Max Kretschmer before the Watford game in what was mentally a difficult game, probably for the pair of you, was going back to Hampton and Richmond again before the FA Cup tie at Kingfield. How do you, as a coach and as an assistant manager, how do you deal with that, both as a plan for you and Dows, or if you're an assistant manager and a manager going forward? But secondly, how do you basically change a plan and keep a positive mindset for the players that you have, give or take the loss of a key member of your squad before a crucial game?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think going back to what I said before about culture and philosophy, I think if you're very kind of clear with that and the expectations of players within your kind of culture, your philosophy, then changing systems or changing personnel within that, I think is probably less of an issue, because the next player in hopefully will understand what's expected of them in terms of an individual within that team. So I do think obviously that ongoing work behind the scenes will help with things like that, where, obviously, important players are important players for a reason. And when you lose them, it does become difficult. And I think football's never an ideal world, especially for managers and coaches. You've always got to be ready. And I think adaptable is a key word, really. You've got to be ready to adapt. Even on a training session, some player might get stuck in traffic or miss a train, and especially in non-league football, those sort of things can happen regularly. So to be adaptable is quite an important thing. I think obviously in development football, you talk about grassroots football and development youth academy football, which I'm sure there'll be some coaches watching now. It's about individual development. So it shouldn't be a win at all cost mentality. So I would like to think that the coaches are focusing on different individual aspects in each game. So if one player is missing for whatever reason, or a couple of players are missing, hopefully they can still utilise the game and get some outcomes for their players. At our level, it's win at all costs. So, you've got to quite quickly find a way, whether that's slotting in a player that can come in and do a similar role, or whether it's changing your shape and your system to obviously compensate that with the players that you have. But I think one of the things that is obviously a key role of a manager and an assistant in a certain way is making sure that the players that aren't in the team at that time are ready. And we talk about the psychological element of that earlier. I think that's a real key part of modern day management, is keeping the squad happy, keeping the players that aren't in the team happy, so that if you do have that situation where at the drop of a hat, and we've had it a couple of times this season where in the warm-up a player gets injured or fails a late fitness test, and you've got to suddenly slot a player in. And some of it you can prepare for, and of course we try and do that to the best of our ability, but sometimes it does catch you a little bit on the hop, and you've just got to adapt and make your best decision at that time. But it's never a nice thing when that happens, but you can only do what you can do, and you've got to make decisions at the right time, I guess.
No, absolutely, and it's never an easy decision to make, or ever an easy decision to have to come across when you lose a key player or you have an incident, especially in the lower league pyramid where players might be fail a late fitness test. It's all part and parcel of football management, and very, very important when coming into team preparation and preparing for a game. And we're now going to go into the topic which I was going to really want to talk about, and that is, how do you prepare for a big game? Of course, in particular, the Watford game in the FA Cup last season was a great advert for non-league football, and it was a great day for Woking Football Club. I think it was second largest attendance at Kingfield for over 22 years. I think the last biggest attendance was the Millwall game in 1997. I might be wrong, but
I'm sure you're right.
I, just to put it out there, I am a Woking fan, so I'm quite biased with this. So I'm a very happy man talking anything Woking, but we have to rein it back from Woking and make sure that it's for coaches and not just one club. So from a coaching point of view, going into a big game, how would you approach this? And in particular, would there be any particular changes to the structure that you would have as a coach going into a big game? What would they be in particular, if there would be any changes?
I think, again, trying to kind of relate it to coaches of all levels. I'm sure everyone as a coach has come across teams where they're maybe going into the game as massive underdogs, or they're coming up against a team that has got better individual players than them. And it's again, how you deal with that, and I guess what you want the outcomes to be. So, I'd like to think in grassroots and youth development coaching that there are individual outcomes, and you are still focusing on your players getting some success and getting some gains out of those games. I think obviously at the top level, and to use our example against Watford, it's really how you can compete, and I think that was a word that Dalsh used in the build up to that game. We wanted to compete in that game and do ourselves justice. We've obviously, the competitive nature we all have, you go into the game dreaming of winning it, and obviously that would have been what we prepared the game to do. But you've also got to be realistic that you're playing against a team. I think they were top 10 in the Premier League at the time, and we were in the National League South, so the gap is a huge one. But yeah, competing was kind of the buzzword, and I think incredible, and a lot of credit to the players. We used it as a big motivator, the build up to that game in the league, and I think we won 6 league games in a row in the build up to that game, and Dallas was very clever. He used that as a real kind of carrot for the players, that if they continued to perform, they would stay in the team and obviously get the opportunity to play on that big stage. So it worked really well for us in the league. In terms of preparing for those games, I think there's a couple of things. When you're playing stronger opposition, I think the first thing you need to do is find out kind of how you can restrict them doing what they do very well. And especially when you're playing against the better opposition, there's 2 things that you probably want to limit. You want to limit the amount of time they have on the ball in dangerous areas, and you want to limit the space that they've got to create and score goals. And I think going back to our kind of scenario, I think that's what we wanted to do. We understood we probably couldn't go and frenetically go and press from the front and nick the ball off their centre backs, because technically them and the goalkeeper and the fullbacks and the midfielders were going to be too good. They'd be able to play through us, and we'd find ourselves in difficult situations in our own half. So we very much allowed them to have that space in their own half and kind of move the ball, and we'd look to keep our shape in behind. And obviously when the opportunity came and they got over the halfway line, that's when we wanted to really go and be aggressive and press the ball. So we understood, we were realistic, that we would have limited chances to have the ball, and it was a case of being organised, being disciplined, I think working as a team and making sure when we had our opportunities to get the ball and progress up the pitch that we did that with as much quality as we could. But I think certainly most coaches will want to focus on their own team, but when you're playing a team that's that many levels above you, I think it's really important to try and limit what they do well as one of your strategies, so that you give yourself an opportunity, or the best opportunity, to be competitive in the game. But great experience for the players and the club as a whole. And I think, the one thing that we took out of that game was that we did compete. We lost the game 2-0, but I think everyone left the ground kind of with a sense of pride about the day and the cup run in general, which is, you could say for us, was a victory in itself. So,
Yeah, it was a fantastic advert for the club and a great day for any Woking fan. I mean, I was extremely proud of the performance of the team on that day, considering the players that were playing in the squad for Watford, and even more pride in the fact that the team that Woking lost to became FA Cup finalists, which is a massive incentive to anybody who plays against a team like that, in sense of going away from that particular fixture and cup match to say you performed this well against a team which are in the FA Cup final, which is obviously a massive motivational positive going forward after a match like that.
Yeah.
And my next question is leading into that as a coach is, how do you use an experience like that, even though the result was negative in the respect that you didn't progress through the FA Cup to the fourth round? But how do you use that kind of example as a positive in a coaching point of view, going forward into the normality, which would be the league fixtures going forward? And for the case of, for you, it was a push for the promotion/playoff places going towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I think there's always that risk, isn't there, when you're involved in a big game like that either before there's a little dip in form because players don't want to get injured, or players want to make sure they're right for that game, and then obviously afterwards there's sometimes that bit of a come down from the whole day. And I think the fact that we did compete in the game and it wasn't a 5 or a 6-0, because these games will be remembered in history, and you want to look back and be proud of the achievement of the cup run, but also of that game and the fact that you could compete on the day. So I think that was important, and I think we used it as motivation by saying what could be achieved. And obviously the Watford game was the highlight of the run, but going to Torquay in the first round and winning, which is a really tough place to go and win, and obviously then going and beating Swindon in the second round away from home again. So it was a fantastic cup run, and I think the whole way along it was just reminding the players that this is what could be achieved if we all buy into it, and if we're all willing to commit and to continue to work hard and perform at that level. And that was really the motivation going forward. Obviously we were embroiled in a battle with Torquay to win the league at the same time, so we had a lot going on, and it was credit to the players and the manager more so for keeping everyone's kind of head on the ground and keeping everyone pushing in the right direction. But it was just a unique experience. We talk about preparation. Training that week was obviously completely different to a normal training week, because I remember on the Thursday night we were trying to do a passing exercise after the warm-up, and we had Football Focus. There was a camera right in the middle. There was BT Sport were there. There was a lot of cameras down there on the night. Douse was mic'd up, had a microphone on him, so obviously had to watch what he said a little bit as well.
Okay. So imagine that as well with Douse.
It was quite a unique training week, and probably as a perfectionist, as a coach, not ideal, because you want to kind of prepare your players and be be organised and be really kind of professional, but you've got cameras and interviews going on, and players are dropping out before training to go and do interviews, and you have to balance it. You can't just be Sergeant Major and say, no, this is it, we've got to do this. You've got to also let the players have their moment in the limelight, because they've earned the right to do that. So it was a quite unique week preparing for that game. I think the other difficult thing for us was we didn't have a clue who was going to play for Watford. Week to week, you get an idea of you're playing a league fixture, who your opponents are going to be, individuals, kind of to a certain point, the shape they're going to play and who's going to play. But we didn't have a clue when the team sheet came in. We had to kind of go through it and piece together how they were going to play and who was going to play, and that made it quite difficult as well. But I think the overall thing for us, the outcome of enjoying the day, of doing the club proud and of competing in the game, was success for us. And obviously for coaches of different levels, success isn't always the scoreline. It's the process, and it's some of the other outcomes that happen within the game, especially obviously with younger players in the development phase. So I think we shouldn't forget that when we talk about preparation. It's not always about winning the game, depending on which level and which age group you're coaching with.
No, absolutely. That's, again, fantastic point there you've mentioned, Ian. Of course, with the problem with being in the cup run for any manager or any coach in the game is the problem with a fixture pile-up. We've seen it all across the different pyramids of football. And the number of games which are played by different clubs goes astronomical. I think, for example, Heybridge Swifts a few seasons ago had an unreal amount of games that they played in their season. I think they almost got to nearly 70 games in the season, which is an unheard of amount of games. And going forward with that in particular, the fixture pile-up with different competitions, does the level of preparation change from competition to competition as a direct result from that?
I don't think you could say your preparation changes. I think maybe your priorities in the way you approach certain competitions would certainly change. But I think we'd be doing a disservice to any of the players in the squad if we said our preparation dropped off at any point. We prepare the same. It's sometimes obviously difficult because if we're playing maybe in a local cup competition, a team that their games aren't televised or recorded, it's sometimes difficult to find the clips, the information we need. So then we rely on obviously going to the games and getting reports that way. So it can be different. I wouldn't say we ever took it less seriously. But what I would say, I think in the modern game, your priorities change with different competitions. I remember Gary Neville a couple of weeks ago talking about his time at Valencia, and one of the big mistakes he made was playing a strong team in the Copa del Rey because the players kept winning, and actually that led to exactly what you're saying there. They had a massive fixture kind of pile up. They didn't get to do any work on the grass with his players, and their league form obviously slumped. So I can understand from a coach's point of view. I was one of those as a fan that when they used to field weakened teams in the FA Cup and the League Cup, I could never understand it, because I thought it was always an opportunity, especially for some of the smaller teams, to really go and win a competition and give their fans a great day out. But as I've gone into coaching, you can kind of understand that fixture congestion and the difficulties it brings later on in the season. So, we're very much a week by week basis. Douse has drummed that into us from day one, that we don't look too far ahead. We're not planning a month into the future. We will take each week as it comes. If one of these cup games falls in a week where we've played a really tough game on a Saturday, it might be some of the fringe players get their opportunity to play. So I think we're very much week by week, but I can also appreciate now being in the game, the other side of it, where you sometimes do have to prioritise with the amount of games that there are and that you could then get later on in the season. I remember that with Heybridge. I think Jody was the manager at the time, and they were doing great in so many competitions that they just had so many league games to play at the end of the year. It became very, very difficult, obviously.
No, a very, very difficult challenge for Jody. I remember that very well from previous experience. It was a tough test for any manager or any coach, especially with the amount of games that catch up with you in the end. And that's a formality of football sometimes, like you've said, Ian, that if you have so many games that you have to play, if you are successful in the competitions that you're in, there is going to be a very, very challenging scenario, but not only for yourself as a coach, but also for the structure around you, the players, the other staff involved too. It's other challenges that you have to face. So it is a very, very interesting point.
It's a catch-22, isn't it, with managers, and you know, this is why I'm not a manager. It's the decisions they have to make at the level of all these things. It's a catch-22, isn't it? Do you concentrate on every competition you're in, and maybe end up just falling short in all of them, or do you really prioritise maybe one or two and sacrifice to a certain extent the other ones, and really give yourself a good chance of going and winning the runs that you really want to target? So I can understand how it's difficult. Of course, common nature tells us as coaches and as people that want to compete that we want to win every single game, and that's always got to be the message that comes across, of course, to the players. But how you do it is obviously different, and I can certainly understand managers and coaches that certainly prioritise in different aspects in terms of competitions, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of things to touch upon before I leave you be and leave you in peace. But it's been an absolute pleasure so far. So I thank you so much for being part of today's show, Ian. When it comes to preparation, again, of course, preparation is the key thing we're talking about here. Just how important is it to have a healthy, balanced relationship with your manager when it comes to preparing a side? Of course, you're very lucky with the relationship that you have with Dowse, of course, having previous experience at your time at Hampton and Richmond. He sold you the dream of Woking. As a result, you came across from Hampton to Woking. Just how important is it as a coach that the relationship with your manager is as positive and as healthy as possible when it comes to preparing a team?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely key, isn't it, to that dynamic in terms of your backroom staff is massively important. I think the one thing that I could say about Dowse that he's always had in me is trust, and from day one, he understood what I kind of brought to the table, and he's trusted in me through our time working together to kind of let me bring that to the table, so to speak. So I think that's really key. I think you do have to be close. I mean, we speak pretty much every day. I think that's important that you have that strong working relationship, and I think it's important to challenge. I think, like I said at the start, my role is to support, and ultimately he's the manager. It's his team. What he says goes and is final. But during those discussions, I can always, and he always encourages me to give my point of view, and we challenge each other at times, and I try and bring new ideas to the table. And I think that's important, and I think that's healthy to do that, because if you're too set in your ways and you're not open to new ideas, then it could become a stale relationship, and obviously that can be then detrimental to the team. So he's always very much welcomed kind of my opinion and Martin Tyler's opinion as well, and we have a lot of dialogue between the three of us. But ultimately, when he makes a decision and when we've talked about it and he makes his final decision, we will all go 100% and support that. And I think that's the key thing about it, that we're all on the same page once we get in front of the players. But yeah, it's such an important dynamic, I think, managers and assistants. And I was doing some notes before the show, and it's interesting. Alex Ferguson, probably the most successful manager of all time, you could argue. He's one of the only managers that regularly changed his assistant. And, I'm hoping this does. I'm not using this as a blueprint, and I hope Dowse isn't listening and the same. But it's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting that he did that. And I think he was constantly looking for that kind of fresh approach and new ideas. And he very much delegated to his assistants, Brian Kidd, Steve McLaren, Rene Mullenstein. He very much delegated that coaching time on the grass with the players and had a lot of trust in them to go and do that. But I can't think of too many other managers that have done that. You see a lot that will work with the same assistant and have that close link, and obviously some more than others. You look at the Cowley brothers. and how close they are as a dynamic that's been very, very successful. So, I'm not sure there is a right or a wrong way, but certainly there's lots of different ways. And I guess if you find something that works, like it has with us, then, it's something that you certainly want to hold on to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final thing to wrap up today's show, with the coaches out there who are watching this program in particular, what key bits of advice would you give to any coaches with regards to team preparations? What are the small individual bits and pieces you would recommend for any aspiring coach when it comes to preparing your team for the big day?
I think first and foremost, you've got to be clear of what your objective is on the game. So you've got to be clear, and your players have to know what the objective is. So going back to obviously grassroots development football, there are lots of different objectives you're trying to get out of that game at the weekend before the result. And I think I want to hammer that point home, that in development football, the result should be secondary to developing the players and individual and collective objectives on a match day. So I think you need to be very clear of that. I don't think you should be coaching to win the game in terms of, putting your best players in a certain position to stop the opposition. I think, you've really got to work on developing. Certainly at our level, it is about winning, and we know that. That's our objective at the end of a week, is to win a game. I would also encourage coaches, especially at senior level, it's not a bad thing to find out as much as you can about the opposition. I hear coaches talking about, let's just concentrate on ourselves. But I think part of that is, and I think part of your role is to gain as much information about the opposition and their environment and their players and their system of play that will ultimately help your team. I think a clear message during the week. So if you're going to go and counter-attack on a Saturday and play counter-attack in football, it's no good on a Tuesday night in training working on passing the ball 20 times in a slow build-up. Everything has to be related to what you're going to go and then do at the weekend. And I think if you can start to sow the seed into your players' mind during the week, it will certainly help come the weekend to kind of transfer those messages across. So I think that's really, really important as well. And obviously, finally, it's about just getting them ready for that game on the weekend. So, people will work with players of different ages and abilities, and they will know the individuals within their group and what might motivate those players for that game. And ultimately, your job is, whatever it takes during the week, if you can prepare your players technically, tactically, and psychologically for the competition at the weekend, then those are the things you need to try and do during the week. So. Like I say, preparations, it's a very kind of broad topic because there's so many different variables that coaches can control in terms of training time, in terms of numbers that they're training, loads of different things come into it. But yeah, I think to have a clear idea of the objective of the weekend and to kind of plan your week in your mind so that everything links into what you're expecting to do at the weekend, I think would certainly probably be the best advice in that respect. But players should enjoy it. I think that the one thing that's lost in coaching a lot of the time, especially when preparing players for the game, is that they're under enough pressure as it is in terms of the expectations, especially at our level and above, that sometimes you've just got the players should be enjoying what they do in the week and be relaxed going into that game. I think relaxed and happy players that have enjoyed what they're doing are probably in the best frame of mind to go and compete at the weekend.
That's absolutely superb. So that's our conclusion for today's show regarding team preparation. You've had plenty of pointers and plenty of discussion from today's episode. Of course, we want to hear from you guys as well. You make the program as much as we all do here at Back of the Net. So get in touch with us via all our social media platforms. And once again, get in contact with us, like and subscribe on YouTube, and click the bell for new content as we produce it. My thanks goes to Ian Dyer. Thank you so much again, Ian, for all your input on today's show. And we hope to see you again very, very soon. Thank you once again.
Cheers, James. Thanks very much.
No problem. And we'll see you again same time next week for another edition of Coach's Corner. Until then, everybody, stay safe and look after yourselves. Bye for now.